Hi, everybody. This is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Darren Saul, serial podcaster, strategist, trainer, coach, and keynote speaker. I'm super excited about this because I think podcasting is awesome. And it's a great way for entrepreneurs to share their message. So, with that, welcome, Darren. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Brett. Really appreciate it, man. And I also think podcasting is awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you on, fellow podcaster. So, I have a bunch of questions that I obviously want to ask you, but I do want to start off a little bit with your background. So, can you share with us your story and how you got into podcasting to begin with?
Yeah, really good one. So I do a number of different things. I've worked as a corporate recruiter for many, many years. I've worked as a photographer. And probably about 6 years ago, I started to realize that the traditional means of marketing and business development weren't working as well. And so I started exploring social media, digital media, and someone pointed me in the direction of podcasting. And I thought, you know what? This sounds like fun. I'm going to give it a go. I set up 2 podcasts, one for each business. And I just started to fall in love with the podcasting process and the whole world of the hidden genre of podcasting. And it's just been a passion of mine ever since. It's brought me great business results. It definitely has made a big difference from a brand awareness point of view, from a content creation point of view. And I've got to the point now where I just want to share that with other people. And I teach courses and have recorded stuff and teach workshops and speak and all that kind of stuff around podcasting.
This is awesome. Yeah. So for me, I'm a lot newer to the whole field, and obviously, the tools and everything else have really evolved a lot since years ago.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the thing that drew me to it initially is, I what I realized, sort of like you, I've been a 17-year entrepreneur, mostly, with a digital business, and I was doing a lot of software stuff. But the
Right.
thing that occurred to me is we were doing things a lot in the affiliate space. And what I started to recognize is you're either beholden to other people to promote your stuff or you have to pay for ads. So
Yep.
I couldn't find a way that I really felt excited about in terms of being able to build an audience. And the fact is, with SEO, it's sort of like a moving target. So I said, there's got to be a better way. If you could build an audience, then you have something where, they can resonate with the message that you have. They can like the things, and you can build it in whatever sort of arena or industry you're in. And so
Yep.
for me, I like that. And I like the fact that it's such an engaging medium, aside from things like social media where it's so disposable.
Yep.
The people are scrolling and it goes so fast. With a podcast, you tend to have a much more captive audience. So I that's sort of what got me into it myself. So I know obviously you're all in on it. Is that what you love about it, or what specifically have really been the benefits for you, and that made you sort of stay with it once you got rolling?
Yeah, good question. I'd say definitely everything you mentioned is exactly in line with how I think as well. And I even heard the other day that even though podcasting is quite a slow process to build connection with an audience, once you have an audience, they stay with you for longer. It's much more of a loyal following than other stuff. Other stuff is very fleeting and transient. So really good point. But I love the process. I love being able to speak to an audience, build a relationship, get people to trust me and build some credibility around what I know through the podcast episodes. But the other thing that I love about podcasting really, and this is my big hidden marketing strategy really, is that podcasting is an incredible way or incredible system for creating marketing content. And a lot of people don't think about it in that way. They think, oh yeah, I'll jump on a podcast and fun show and that's the end of that. But that's only where it begins. If you can start really leveraging and repurposing the content that you create from the podcast episodes, and this goes for whether you're a guest or a host, that is the true power of the podcast, because it's not just one show that's gone and the next show's up. You've got to now use that material for the next 6 months and help to further develop your business and your credibility, your trust and your brand and all that stuff. So that's the real thing that I teach a lot. It's podcasting is great for podcasting's sake, but it's the marketing content piece that is the most important.
Yeah, I really like that. I know one of the struggles that I had initially was I was trying to figure out because I intuitively understood that, but I was trying to figure out how can I repurpose what I'm doing
Yeah,
here so I could use it in other ways because I knew that there was value there. But the other thing I have to say that I really love is I think it's so much easier to be authentic with a podcast than it is with a lot of the other because the other thing about it is, I mean, it would be hard, I think, first of all, to be a phony. But beyond that, it just makes logical sense anyway, because you want to resonate with the audience that you want to be with and hang out with and all that other stuff
that's right.
anyway. So I like the fact that in general, I think, when I listen to podcasts and the podcasters that I know, they tend to be real. They tend to be authentic with what they're
Yep.
sharing and what they're talking about. And it's easy to convey a lot and even complex and deep topics because you're speaking. It's hard to do that in an image, right? It's hard to
Absolutely.
do that in something that's, something's going to scroll past it or whatever. So in your experience or your opinion, do you think anyone and everyone should start a podcast, or is it better for certain kinds of people, certain professions? What's your take on that?
Yeah, honestly, I think, as you mentioned, it's really about connecting with your audience, building trust and building authenticity. And that can be applied to any industry, any niche, personal or professional agenda, community agenda, anything that you are trying to build some credibility or message across or build an audience for, a podcast is an incredible medium. So it's for everyone. And a lot of people will say, oh my God, isn't it a bit saturated now? There's too many podcasts. And that is to a point true, but a lot of the time, apparently there's some ridiculous number of podcasts being started every day, but there's also only a very, very small percentage that actually get past episode 20, I think, something along
Yeah,
those lines. So
I
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
So it's very much it's a long game and it's a persistent game, and a lot of people get excited and then they never continue.
Yeah, I think the statistic is 97% don't make it past the 21st episode.
Crazy, crazy.
And I think it's only 10% make it past three
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah, that's
So
it.
while there are tons of podcasts, I think because I think here's one of the challenges. We live in such a instant gratification society
Yep.
and day and age
Hmm.
that it's very difficult for people to persist with anything.
Yeah.
Um, I've always looked at it this way. I've never been a big social media guy, and you can think what you want about this social media person or that person, but I'll tell you this: unless they were a celebrity before they started, the one thing they all deserve credit for is having the perseverance to keep going.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
if you're a celebrity and you start off, obviously, I mean, you've got an instant following. The minute you put something online, it's going to explode.
Yep.
But if you're a normal person that nobody knows and you have to build that from the ground up, even if your content isn't great, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of perseverance. I know, Mr. Beast in the whole YouTube, universe, he's the king of YouTube or whatever. But he
Yep.
said the first 2 or 3 years he was making videos, he got nobody to watch them.
Yep.
Everybody said to him, his family, his friends, they're like, what are you doing? Go to college, get a degree. He's like, I just love making videos. This
Yeah.
is what I want to do. And he
Absolutely.
stuck with it. And, look, I think the guy does a lot of tremendously good things for a lot of people. So, kudos to him for sticking with it. But I do think that's a challenge. And I think that it's important to come at it from the perspective of not what you're going to get out of it,
Yep.
but the fact that you're doing it because you're passionate about the process.
Yes.
And I think if your desire to connect with an audience is real, and that's really what you want, then all the rest of it is sort of the results of it. But it's not because if you're doing it for an instant result, I got news for you, it's not going to work out. It
No.
takes a long time
Yeah,
to build it
that's
and do
right.
it the
We're
right way.
very built on instant gratification, as you say, and we want results now. And if we don't get them, we move to the next shiny object. But that's just not the way it is.
So I was, so we sort of treaded a little bit on what I wanted to ask you next, because I was going to say, it does seem like the in thing, right? Everybody's
Mm,
jumping on the bandwagon for podcasts. I see celebrity after celebrity now starting a podcast. It's like the
yep,
in thing to do. Everybody's good. And of course they have the advantage because they have an audience. So
that's right.
if they start one tomorrow and you're, a professional athlete or you're an actor or something like that, it's going to explode in 2 weeks. You're going to have everybody wanting to buy it, invest in it, advertise on it because they know you have a built-in audience. But the reality of it is, for everybody else, I guess the question that I've got is the timing still good? I know we talked about the fact that, not a lot of them survive, but do you think that because it's so in vogue, do you still think it's okay? Like if I was somebody that hadn't started yet and I was thinking about starting a podcast, is it too late or does it make sense for me to still get going with it?
Yeah, I would definitely say it makes sense for you to get going. And I liken it to a website. It's almost like in the old days, nobody had a website, and then everybody had a website. And it's almost like nobody had a podcast, now everybody's going to have a podcast. It's just like the thing. So if anybody is looking for your products or your services and they want to know more about you, they search for you and see if you've got a podcast and they listen to an episode or two and they say, I like this person. I'm going to go and do some more research. I'm going to buy something. I'm going to go and check out the service or the store. It's almost like a must have to build that credibility. And even if, so you see, even in that respect, people might even be finding you through a different channel just to verify your credibility in the marketplace. So you don't have to worry about the fact that you might be competing against 100,000 others on the podcast app because it's going to be used for another purpose in a way. So I think let's not worry too much about the fact that there are so many podcasts out there. It's more about everybody should have a podcast purely because it's a way of building that credibility in your space and building the trust and awareness and building your target audience and your tribe, your community.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly resonate with that. I like that idea, and I also believe that we need to worry less about competition
Mm.
because look, there's been competition in every industry
Yeah,
since the beginning of each industry.
yeah,
Yet there are new players all the time
yeah,
that appear, and all of a sudden they disrupt what was going on because
yeah.
you don't need 80% of the people in the world to listen to your podcast. You
That's
only
right.
need the small percentage that you need
That
to
you
be
need
able
to
to build the
serve.
tribe, build the audience. Exactly. And
Yeah,
so the other thing about it is, and I would argue that this is a big benefit too, is the fact that one of the things that I love about it is I love having guests on like you because part of it for me is I get an education through the process of doing this. I mean, I've done a lot of solo episodes and I certainly like to do that. I like to share what I know. I think it's nice to have that sort of one-on-one time with your audience. At the same time, I don't want, they're going to get tired of hearing just from me. I want to get other people's perspectives, but it's awesome for me because when else would I have an opportunity to have somebody on, talk to them for a half an hour or 45 minutes in depth, ask whatever questions I want,
yep, love it.
and be able to do that and get my own education while I'm doing it. So I
Yep.
learn something every episode that I do.
Yeah, and it's people from around the world as well. That's the other thing that I love about it. It's not about having the studio and all the gear and being local. It's about having your home studio and then talking to people all around the world. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, the technology now is just insane. It's gotten so
Yep.
good in terms of being able to do all that. And there's so much high speed internet that
Yep.
you can even do really high quality stuff. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about what we need to start a podcast. So, what do you think? I mean, there's a ton of tools, there's a ton of
Yeah.
technology, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. In your opinion, what do you think the best tools and technology are right now in terms of starting a podcast?
Yeah, easy. Well, I'll kind of break it down into if we talk about the tech first or the hardware first, you just need some kind of microphone. It can be one of these mics that we're using. It can be your AirPods. It could be a lapel mic. Just some kind of microphone that's not your standard speaking to the computer because that gets a bit echoey. And you can buy these mics now for $50 or or $100 and they're really good quality mics. You need some kind of lighting, so you ideally need some ring lights or some kind of lighting from the front. And you need a video camera. So it could be the inbuilt camera in your computer, which I'm using right now. Sometimes I have an external Logitech that's on my big screen. And all that you can set up for about $150, $200 Australian max. So really, really low cost, and you can have great studio from a hardware point of view. And then you just need a bit of software, and most of it's free. So if you want to set up a video and audio version, I think, which I highly recommend people do, your video is going to be YouTube, definitely, because YouTube is such a powerful search engine, and that's free. And then you can find a podcast app, and there's ones like Spotify for podcasters, Podbean, Buzzsprout. Oh, there's hundreds of them. What's the other one everybody talks about? Can't think of it. There's a Lincia or something. Anyway, whatever.
Libsyn?
Yeah, Libsyn. That's it. Libsyn.
Yeah.
There
There's
are
Libsyn.
so many products out there. And most of the base models or the base packages are free. And they've got great functionality. Riverside. And then you need actually something to actually do the podcast episode in. And I, to this day, I'll go old school and I use Zoom. But I have used Riverside before, like this, which is fantastic. There's StreamYard, there's Squadcast, and a lot of those things have built-in AI-driven workflow into the back end as well. So it starts to take video little snippets for you after the episode and does your transcripts for you, all using AI. So you've got your hardware, you've got your housing, which is your YouTube and your podcast app, and then you've got some kind of app or software that you're going to use to actually record the episode. And that's it. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, I've experimented with a few different things, and I can say what I would recommend is obviously if you're going to invest any extra money, certainly invest it in your microphone, your camera, right? Because you want the quality of the broadcast to be good. As you mentioned, the array microphone that's built into a normal computer is not good because it's not directional. So you're basically going to pick up all the background noise. It's going to sound tinny. If you turn it up too high, there's going to be an echo, and nothing turns people off worse than bad quality audio, even if the subject matter is great. So that said, one of the greatest technological evolutions recently has been the USB powered microphones. I know years ago before I was doing podcasting, I was doing a lot of online video for my software products and stuff, tutorials and things like that. And I had to buy a powered mic. So you need a preamp for it. Even though it would still work with the computer, you needed 3 or 4 pieces of equipment. You needed to know how to use it. You have to worry about things like gain. And I didn't know anything about audio. The audio recording sort of thing is very technical. It's surprisingly technical how much goes into it.
It's a bit of a rabbit hole.
Exactly. And I mean, the more you learn, it's true. You're, oh, wow, there's a whole nother set of things I could do. Now it's so simple because you can even get a USB powered mic. This guy right here I have multiple microphones, but this one here, actually it's Australian made. So,
is there a Rode? Must be
it's a Rode. Yeah. Rode is my favorite. Yeah. I've always used Rode. And, but the thing of it is, this is a USB powered mic. And so you don't even need the preamp or anything else. And in fact, you can run it out of a cell phone. So you could literally record out of it's incredible how far it's come. And ring lights, now you can get USB powered ring lights too. You don't even need to plug them in. So they're portable. You can take them with you. You know, the webcams now are really good. They've got webcams that do 4K and stuff. So it's incredible how far it's come. And as you mentioned, the software side of it too, with the apps now, because it'll chop up your episode, it'll create those little mini things for you. It's really great. There's never been a better time from a technological standpoint to get into it, because if you're scared of the technology, there's no reason to be. It's so easy now.
Yeah. Like AI is almost doing it all on autopilot for you, and everybody's creating the software in such a user-friendly way because it's so accessible, and everybody's jumping on, and it's like it's like podcasting for dummies. You don't have to know anything technical.
Exactly. Yeah, you used to need to be an audio engineer to do it. Now you're all good. So, all right. So let's shift gears. Let's say, okay, we've got the technology. We're excited. We want to do a podcast. I got another concern. How do I get guests, right?
Ah,
If I know what I want to do is I want to have a podcast where I'm afraid I might not have a lot of content. So what I'm thinking is I want to do an interview-based podcast. How can podcasters find guests to interview in a reliable way where they could be able to make enough episodes from that?
easy. There's so many ways. Well, first and foremost, I always say start with your close circle. Who do you know? Who do you know in the office? Who are your colleagues? Who are your collaborators? Your business partners? Family and friends? Anybody that might be a relevant guest? Start in your small circle and then start to broaden that. And after that, you can join a networking group. So I've got a lot of my guests through a business network that I belong to called BX, and it's full of incredible small businesses and solopreneurs that are such experts in their field, and all of them are dying to tell their story. So it's an incredible way to access guests. The other way is social media. Like use social media and say, guys, I'm just starting a podcast on this topic. I'm about to launch so many episodes. I really want to network. Who's out there that wants to get on the show? And the amount of groups on Facebook and LinkedIn, podcasting groups, is enormous, and they're all dying to get on podcasts. So there's another incredible source of guests. And then the other one, which happens over time, is referrals. The better you are in your process, the better that you conduct your interviews, the better experience you give your guests, they'll start referring everybody else to you as well. So you'll never be short of guests. And then the other one that I should actually mention, which is how we met, is all these new podcast directories. So there's a fantastic one at the moment called Pod Match. And that's how we connected. And it's connecting podcast hosts with podcast guests for a very low cost. You can sign up and you access people all over the world that are dying to collaborate. And it's fantastic. So there is no excuse for not having a guest to interview. There are hundreds and thousands of them all over.
You know, it's funny because I think a lot of people have reservations about that. They feel as though, you know what, if I'm a new podcaster, I don't have a big show, I don't have a big following, who's going to want to? But you'd be amazed how many people want to be on a podcast because they can use it as a credibility builder anyway. Most people have no idea how big or small a podcast is unless it's a name brand one that everybody knows or it's right at the very top of the charts. If it's not in one of those two buckets, then basically it's hard to know how successful a podcast is anyway. So most people, if they can be on one, they can use that as swag that they can then say, well, I was featured on this podcast. So as the host, you don't want to be self-conscious about, well, I don't know what to offer because, you know, I don't know if anyone's going to want to be, you'd be amazed how many people will want to be on your show
Yeah.
and, you know, will want to be interviewed and because they want to get their message out, as you said.
Yeah.
Everybody, the flip side of doing the podcast is people understand now that being on the podcast is really valuable. And so there's a big demand in that regard as well. And I think that's started to swell really a lot as you know, also. So I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah. And two really good points, if I could just jump in.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, a lot of people are realizing the power and the potential of getting on podcasts. So I always say to people, if you don't want to go through the effort of setting up your own show and preparing it and producing it and promoting it, which is all work, just do a strategy where you get on someone else's show once a week, get the content, repurpose the content, and there's 80% of the reward for 20% of the effort. So that's another great thing to think about if you don't want to actually go and set up yourself. And the other point you made is really interesting as well, is that even if you're on a show of a massive following, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to resonate with what you're promoting or what you're talking about. And you get on a small show and all of a sudden that audience is just right for you and you can bring all sorts of results. So the size of the audience doesn't always translate to the results.
Yeah, people get excited about that sticker shock, but I've talked to actually other people as well, and they've said, you know, I've gotten people on my show that I was so excited because they're somebody everybody knows, and they didn't even share it with their audience after.
There you go.
So, despite how much reach there might be, it didn't even matter because they didn't share it. And then you'll have somebody on who's a little, you know, smaller, less well known, but they're hungry. They're doing all the right things. They're aggressively promoting it. You end up getting 20 new referrals or clients or leads from that. So you never know. It
Yeah.
is sort of that idea of putting the content out there, doing the effort, to get your message out there, and don't worry about specifically where the results are going to come from. Just do it from the heart, do it from your passion,
Yeah.
and worry about the results later, and just trust that it'll be there. So
Yeah.
okay, so if somebody's at a point now, we've got it, okay, we're going to do this, we got somebody lined up to do an interview. Now I'm nervous as heck because what do I ask the person? I don't know how to do this. Well, how should a podcast host prepare for an episode that they're going to
Mm.
record if they've got a guest coming on and that they need to interview?
Yeah, perfect. Well, the first piece of advice would be prepare. Don't not prepare. Because I know a lot of people that just turn on the mic and say, all right, let's chat. And the episode can be great, but it can also become a train wreck really quickly. So if you have a little bit of a framework or a little bit of a structure for how you want that episode to go, and you've done a little bit of prep, doesn't have to be a lot, it just makes all the difference. And it's the same for the guest. The guest has to prepare as well. And me, because I'm doing this show so many times, I'm talking about the same stuff. I don't have to prepare as much anymore because I know all the questions that people are going to ask me, and I've answered them a thousand times. But if you're starting out, you've really got to prepare. You've got to get your story right. As a podcaster, you've got to understand how you conduct a conversation. I like to start wide and drill down slow and slow in further and further into the topic. And it has a flow, just like anything else. And so definitely preparation is the key. And there are loads of resources on the internet that are free, where you can really just learn about how to prepare your guest better, how to prepare yourself, how to conduct an interview, what questions to ask, etc., etc. But the preparation is really important because you want to have some kind of a framework. And it doesn't mean you have to be verbatim, but you just have to have a bit of a flow so you know where you're going and the episode has a purpose. Otherwise, it can jump from one topic to another and it seems a bit disjointed.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always fun to just sit down and have a coffee talk with somebody, but you can't guarantee that you're gonna produce good content if you're doing
Yeah,
that. So
that's
at the
right.
end of the day, if you've done the research, the other thing is, from my perspective, I always feel as though if somebody's gonna do me the honor to come on, I want to respect that and respect their time by
Absolutely.
preparing and making sure that I know somewhat about them, so I can ask the questions that are going to help them share their story and experience that benefits the audience, but also benefits the guest.
Yep.
And I would say that if somebody was brand new and they were really nervous, interview a friend, interview a family member to start, just
Yeah.
so you get accustomed to it, because I know one of the things that some new podcasters will do is they'll prepare, but they've got a list of questions, and so then it's like an interrogation.
Yeah. It's like,
What
oh,
question?
and they're not even listening to the answer. It's like, oh, next question. Oh, next. It becomes very robotic. So you have to
And
find
that,
that balance.
yeah, that's scary for the guests too, because
Yeah.
as a guest, you're like, oh, I don't know where this is going next.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, it's like anything else, right? The more we do it, the better we get at it, the
Yeah,
more natural it becomes, and there's no substitute for experience. So,
100%. If I go back
um,
to my first few episodes, they were terrible. Like
oh,
I ran out of questions after the third one.
yeah, yeah. It's look, and I mean, look, we've all done it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the same thing. Whether we're driving a car, riding a bike. I mean, nobody
that's
gets
right.
on the bike the first time and does wheelies down the block. They fall
That's
over,
right.
skin their knee, get up,
Yeah,
and try it again.
that's
So,
it. It's just practice, just like anything.
so another concern I know people have is they're like, all right, I'm not a techie, and we touched on this a little bit, but I've got this episode.
Mm.
I've recorded this episode. Now, what do I do? Like, how do I produce this? How do I publish it? Like, what
Yep.
what are the steps or what are the shortcuts there in terms of how hard is it or easy to actually publish an episode?
Yeah, great. Good question. And this question comes up a lot, and it can be answered by how long is a piece of string. Like, if you want to go to town and really overproduce everything and spend a day on it, you can. If you want to get it out really quickly and raw, you can as well. So it's really just how much you want to put into the production. But if you can try and optimize the quality going in, there's less work to do on the back end. So if you get the sound right, you get the video right, use the right tools, you almost have to do very little to it if you want to. But if you want to do something to it, a great little tip that I always give is, instead of recreating the wheel and editing the audio separately from the video and all that kind of stuff, is just edit it all in one shot using one piece of software. So if you're a Mac person, I throw it into iMovie and I edit the video and the audio at the same time, make sure the episode is sharp, and then I'll export the audio file separately and the video file separately from the same final product, and then throw them up into the apps. And that just cuts my time down a lot. So there's things like that. If you have a bit of money and you want to outsource it, I've started using a team now that help me do things overseas, and they're fantastic audio engineers, freelancers from the Philippines, and they do incredible work. And I just send them a Google Drive, they put everything back, and I upload it. So there's loads of ways around it if you don't want to do the work. But the key is try and get it really good quality on the coming in, so you don't have to do as much on the back end, and try and streamline the process so you don't have to do things twice and three times and double work.
It's a great point, because the post-production, you can make things good, you can improve things, but it's very hard to take terrible source stuff and make it good. I've recorded audio before that was tinny or scratchy, and I've tried to play with it, and I'm like, I just have to scrap it. I can't. Thankfully, that never happened on an interview episode, but that's happened to me before on solo episodes. And I said, it was a lot of time that I put into this, but if I wouldn't listen to it, I'm not going to put it out to my audience. So I've just got to scrap it and start over, because there are tools that will help you, but they're not going to cure it if it's a mess. So it's a great point to start with really good quality on the ins, because if you have that, there's a lot you can do with it in post-production as well.
Right.
So
and the other thing is, like with some of these apps, sometimes the connection to the microphone that you're using just drops off. So once or twice I'm in a show and then I realize at the end, it was picking up my voice from the computer mic. For some reason it just switched. And the difference in the quality is enormous. I said, wow, what happened there? So you really got to just make sure that it's all set up before you start. Say, all right, we're ready to go.
I've had that issue with internet connection. That was one issue I did have with a couple of the interviews that I did, where their connection wasn't good or mine wasn't, and so it was skewed. When I listened to the video after, the audio wasn't aligned. Thankfully, it recorded well, because it records on your local computer and then uploads. But it was like off. So it was like watching a movie when the mouth is moving and the words don't match. And you're like, no, I gotta adjust that. But exactly. So all right, so let's talk about podcast growth. So we touched on this, but a lot of podcasters get frustrated because they think, okay, it's like Field of Dreams. If I build it, they'll come. All I got to do is create a couple episodes. I'm going to be raking in sponsors. I'm going to be raking in, all kinds of stuff. Do you have tips on how you can grow an audience and promote a podcast? Because obviously growth is something that's really important to people.
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing I like to say is, your podcast is like a website. You can have the most amazing website, and if nobody knows it exists, what's the point? And a podcast is exactly the same. So when I teach, I always talk about my 3 P's of podcasting. P for preparation, P for production, and the last one is P for promotion. And if you don't promote your episodes and do a lot of marketing around your show, don't expect an incredible number of visitors. It just doesn't happen. And I'm constantly trying to promote in different ways. And what I like to do is draw on how other industries promote things. So think about how Hollywood promotes film, or how they promote a TV series coming up, or greatest hits for radio or music. So you can do the same type of stuff with your podcast episodes. So try and draw from other places and how they promote. Promote behind the scenes, documentary type content. And then promote all your stuff and leverage and repurpose it on social media. So every episode that I do, I'll take a 30-second trailer and I'll throw that up on social media on all my channels and point everybody to the full episodes. I'll do the same thing in my newsletter. I'll pop a little link on my email signature. I will talk about it everywhere I go. I'll put it into my networking groups. I'll just find every audience that I think I can leverage to talk about my podcast. You leverage it. That's the whole world of promotion and marketing. So you really have to do a lot of work on that side. And you can also get people to help you do things like that as well. One thing that I'm not great on is optimizing my YouTube channel. So one day I'm going to have to get someone to help me really tweak that, because that's another whole world. Every platform has its own art. It's crazy, but I've only got so much time in the day.
It is crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, but yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you do have to sort of put it out there. And the other thing is you have to be patient, because just because you put some stuff out on social media doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to have a million visitors. It takes time for that to build up. But I think it's also one of the advantages of doing interview style podcasts if you're somebody who's new with no following, because you get to, in general, tap into their following. They're going to promote the episode. If when you produce an episode, you get them all the links for the various things, make it easy for your guests to be able to share it, right?
Yeah.
Give them all the content that they need. Let them chop up the episode if they want, but also give them the links to the episodes, links to wherever it's going to be. And so they can use it as they choose as well. It benefits them, but it also benefits you, because if they share it with their audience, you get some exposure that way as well.
Definitely.
And I think
a couple of good products that you can use AI, use things like Splash.io, which is Splash.io, Opus Clip. There's so many other products that I've heard that are now using AI, and I use them to chop up your videos for you, so you don't have to do all the work. Just throw it in there, put it into a folder, give the link to your guest, and off you go. And that's a really good point about using a guest, is the more people you can leverage for that one episode, the more reach you're going to get. So another good tactic would be do more round tables. Invite 3 or 4 people to the episode. So now you can have 4 times the amount of reach. So it can escalate and accelerate quite fast if you just be a bit creative in how you do it.
Yeah, that's smart. I think the most I've ever had on one episode is 2 guests at the same time, but that's certainly a cool idea too. If you open up a discussion, maybe you have a couple of topics that you're going to kick around, and everybody can share their idea. Because I will tell you this, I was at a marketing conference years ago, and it was, I don't know if you're familiar with Jay Abraham, but he's basically a marketing legend in the sort of the offline world. And now, he's older school, but he had done some things with amazing things with brands. And he had an event years ago. I had a brick and mortar business, and so I went to it. And one of the things that they did, they called them hot seats. And he had like 4 or 5 guest speakers over the weekend. So when they would do a hot seat, they'd have a business owner come up, sit there, and he and all the other guys that were the experts would stand there, and they'd say, tell us about your business and what your problems are. And what to me was the most fascinating part was not any individual's contribution, but the fact that when you have 4 people or 5 people all spinning off the same idea and building on it, the difference between the first comment, critique, or piece of advice and the one 10 minutes later, in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes, the quality of the suggestions and advice was astounding to me.
I agree.
Because they all fed off each other's energy and ideas, and it was just absolutely amazing. By the time they were done, the business owner was like, because you would have paid $10,000 for that. You know what I mean? And
sure, that's business coaching on steroids.
exactly. So it was super, super awesome. Yeah. All right. So I guess the last bastion of all this stuff is monetizing. So let's say that we're starting to build it. And we understand that we're not going to be able to monetize it right away, but what are the steps, or how can we, or when can we monetize our podcast?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And something that I'm thinking about more and more these days. And I think it's almost the era of monetization of podcasts, because podcasting has become so mainstream and everybody's doing it for a while and they're realizing that there's a lot of work that goes into it. I think it's only normal for people to say, all right, how am I going to start leveraging and getting some revenue out of this? Because this is a lot of work. And it's rightly so. And I always say to people, like, if you go to a publicist or a PR person, they charge you. You go to a photographer, they charge you. You go to a marketing specialist, a consultant, they charge you. Why don't you pay your podcaster, or why don't you pay some kind of service for the podcast audience and leverage you're going to get? So that's one way to do it, is to start charging guests in some form for the opportunity and the quality interview. So that's what I do. I charge guests a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit. So it just covers my time and my editing and my processing and all that stuff. But in terms of monetization, there's probably, I've come up with about 15 or 16 different ways to monetize, and they're indirect versus direct. So the most direct one would be sponsorships. But those ones are where you're going to need big followings and big audiences for people to say, all right, it's worth me spending so much money on every show to give you a spot. There you go. But there's so many other ways you can start monetizing in a very clever, indirect way, straight from the get-go, and you can start bringing some extra revenue. So, for example, you might want to say, all right, I'm an expert in my field, and I'm going to put out 80% of my content on the podcast for free, but then I'm going to hold back 20% of my premium resources, whether they be PDFs, episodes, videos, whatever, and I can hold them back and I can say, all right, there's 80% of my stuff for free. If you like it, great. If you want more, join my subscription, and for very low cost, I'm going to give you more stuff. So there's one way to monetize straight off the bat. And that further leads to putting you on a pedestal as a thought leader. And then people might start asking you to do workshops and speaking and coaching and you get more, and consulting, and you make more money off of that. So there's just one way. And then there's things like merchandise. So let's say I was collaborating in a particular field, and another company or some kind of brand might want to just have a microphone, with their brand on it, or a little water bottle, or a cap, or a T-shirt, or something, and then that means that they're co-sponsors of my event in a visual sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that can be much cheaper than other ways of sponsorship. There's just two, but there's thousands of ways, or 15 or 16 really clever ways that you can do this off the bat. But if you think creatively, there's a million ways that you can come up with to start partnering and collaborating and bringing some revenue back into your show and your workflow. You don't have to wait to become Joe Rogan to start getting massive sponsorships.
Yeah, no, it's really smart to sort of expand the way that you think and change the perception, because I do think when most people think of monetization, they think of sponsors, they think of ads. But the fact of the matter is, if you're positioning yourself as a subject matter expert in whatever it is you're doing, there's a lot of other avenues that you can pursue there. And a lot of people will pay you for your time one way or another. I mean, you can do workshops, you can do a coaching program, all these other things. I think the key still always comes back to the same thing, and that is do something where you're creating great content, because that ultimately is going to be the thing that builds the audience, and building the audience is the thing that makes it valuable, right? So, I mean, I think that's sort of, it kind of comes full circle there. And, it's normal to think about monetizing, but the important thing, especially in the beginning, is just to get it up, get it running, and make sure that you're consistent with it. So great advice.
It almost will happen naturally. At a certain point, opportunities will start knocking on your door when you've done it for long enough.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I know, so initially when I started off and I was doing episodes and I had to do all the outreach for everything and now I actually get a lot of people that reach out to me that want to be guests on the show. And so it takes a little bit of time, but once you get it going, it really does pick up speed, and then it gets more and more exciting and more fun to do. So if you're willing to put in the work up front, and again, and that's why it all comes back to being authentic and having it be about the passion of what you love, not chasing the money, not doing it for the money, or doing it in a niche that you think there's money, but rather doing it because it's something that you love. So that way your passion comes through and you'll stick through it even when it isn't profitable. And then eventually you'll get to the place that you want to be. So,
And that's what I want to just add is, like, if you really think about this from a business point of view and a trust point of view, even if you take all that off the table and we just say, if one person is doing some research about a service or a product and they stumble onto a product that has nothing, and then they stumble onto a product that has a whole podcast and a whole world around to allow them to dive in and get to know them, who are they going to buy from? It's a no-brainer. So
Yeah.
there's
In
already
fact,
revenue for you.
yeah, no, in fact, studies show that now I think it's something like 68% of people will look you up online before they'll do business with you anyway.
Yep.
So, right, if they see the credibility, it's right there. It's different than just a website because a
Yeah.
website doesn't necessarily have a lot of content. It is a marketing sort of tool.
Yeah.
Whereas a podcast is content also. So it builds credibility at the same time that it has the marketing element to it. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. And you can go so much
Um,
deeper in a podcast than on a website page, like so much deeper.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. I really do. So, all right. So where can people find you, find your products, find your services, connect with you?
Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate that. So just jump on my website. It's suspendedanimation.com.au, and you can jump on all my podcast links. I've got loads of courses, including courses on monetization. I've got some free downloads. I've got some a 7-day challenge, a free 7-day podcast launch challenge that you're going to get 7 days great worth of content to help you launch your podcast. So it's all on my website. Feel free to check it out.
Nice. I love the website too. What a cool name. What a good
Yeah,
idea.
it's an interesting name that came. My uncle always used to talk about that as a phrase when someone was like, like a deer in the headlights. He used to say, "Oh, suspended animation." And I thought, you know what?
Love
When I
that.
started doing some photography work, I thought that's a great name for a photo business because that's really what it
Brilliant.
is. Suspended animation. And
Yeah.
so then I just made that my brand for all my artistic, creative stuff.
Very cool. I like it. I'm a little jealous. All right. I have one last question I have to ask because I think it's important and I always want to know what everyone has to say about it. And that is, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
That's easy. It's just stick with it and be consistent and be patient. Like nothing's going to come overnight. You got to go through the journey and you get better and you learn and never give up. Be prepared to fail, but just keep on going and you'll find your way.
I love that advice. It's definitely advice I live by because I can tell you that, for my own journey, it wasn't always straight and narrow. It wasn't
Definitely.
simple, but I didn't give up because it was
Yep.
important to me. So I think that's very sage advice. Perfect. Thanks a lot for that. All right. So with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again so much, Darren, for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. And thanks a lot to you for tuning in. As always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.